Hello everybody. Today we start, let's say, pilot episode of a series of interviews with living composers, and our first guest is Dmitry Kourliandski. Hello, Dmitry.
Hello, Sasha.
My first question is, as I know, you started to compose music quite late, and you were initially a flutist.
Yeah.
So how did you start to compose, and why?
Actually, I started by accident. Yes, I started as a flutist. I was 5 when my parents decided that I have to be a musician. I finished the musical school, then I finished the musical college of the Moscow Conservatoire, and then I entered the preliminary course of flute in Paris Municipal Conservatory to prepare for the Paris Conservatoire. But there in Paris I overplayed, I don't know how to say exactly, I overplayed my lips. I couldn't continue. It was a big stress for me, and psychological stress also, because I was 20 already, and after having 15 years of knowing what I am and where I go, at 20, when I'm already started to be constructed, more or less constructed person, I lose all I have. And I come back to Moscow without any knowing what to do and how to proceed in life. So I decided to prepare myself for to enter Moscow Conservatoire, probably as a choir conductor or conductor. And my polyphony teacher, she noticed that I was quite successful with polyphony studies, with the sketches which I did in polyphony, and she proposed me to go to composition teacher, professor of Moscow Conservatoire, Leonid Bobylov, and to ask him if there is any possibility to try the composition department. I came to him and I said that I want to enter conservatoire this year. He said, yes, let's try, show me what you have. And I said that I have nothing, because I never even thought about composition. I never had an idea that I can combine notes, sounds, rhythms, etc. So he said, okay, let's try. As you see, it's happened by accident, really. Mm-hmm. Physical accident.
But in just 6 or 7 years after you started, you won one of the most prestigious composition competitions, Donemus. And as I know, there were not too many possibilities for young composers in Russia. So how did it happen, and what did it mean to you?
After entering the conservatoire, in a year, let's say, I stopped to compose, because I was not happy with what I'm doing. Mm-hmm. I realized that I'm copying some models, existing models, and I felt uncomfortable in being a copyist. Mm-hmm. So I started to listen a lot to contemporary music, and what I found out, what I noticed, is that there is no general direction, no general school, that the contemporary music is very varied, is very different, very sometimes opposite one tradition to another tradition. And that didn't help to find myself, but it helped me to reject all the existing influences which I started to notice in my work. And by rejecting, this way of rejecting guided me to, well, by that time it was a kind of opening for me. I found out my own psychological, biographical structures which are connected to my biography and my physiology and psychology, and they have no connection to musical tradition. So my influences and my language, let's say, which I started to find was not based on my musical experience, was not based on my hearing experience. It was based on my psychological specifics. And this guided me to, actually, the most important points of my starting point again of development was it was 2 points. One point is the sound which bears pain. I believe, and actually that's true more or less, that musicians have, let's call it empathic hearing. When pianists listen to piano music, they feel it with their fingers. When vocalists or wind instrument players listen to wind or vocal music, they breathe together with the music which they hear. And the same with violinists, they feel the positions of fingers. For me, flute connected to the feeling of pain, the feeling of this accident, the feeling of losing control, losing the ground. So in a kind of parallel, I had this strong connection of sound and music with this feeling of loss, feeling of pain, physical pain. So that's why I started to write music which is mostly connected to what is called extended techniques. So for me, by that time, it was a kind of image of impossibility of sound. And this impossibility guided me to this noise, more or less noise language, which I started in beginning of 2000s. Yeah, this is one side of starting. And the other side is the structuring of time. It is connected also to my child experience. When everybody faces this question of infinity when we are children, what is infinity? How to approach it? How to understand? How to deal with it? With this feeling of infinity. I was 6 or something about that. I came to my father and I asked him to explain me what it is. He's a physician, so first he tried to explain me it in more or less scientist language, and then he asked me, what is infinity for you? And I said that for me it is my small room. I wake up in the morning in my small room where I was not born, but I lived there since I was 2 or 3 years. And I wake up in the morning, I open the door and I see again my room. I open the door and I see again my room. So this is infinite chain of very small rooms. It's a kind of agoraphobic picture of universe. And this idea of agoraphobia, I suddenly noticed that it's very much connected to my feeling of space in general, because I love closed spaces, small spaces. It's important for me that the doors are closed, and I feel comfortable in the smaller the space, the more comfortable I feel, the more I concentrated on myself. started to search for this kind of agoraphobic structured system, not composed but existing in nature, in life. And I noticed that we live in such kind of cage. The time structured in the system of communicative vessels. The day becomes longer, the night becomes shorter, and on the contrary, yes? Mm-hmm. And these communicative vessels, this system, rhythmic system, is a kind of structure which we are enclosed in. Mm-hmm. And if we break this structure, the life will stop, because this structure permits us to live, to survive. Mm-hmm. So I felt myself in this time cage, which I formulated for myself, and I decided to create a numerical model of these communicative vessels. It's a very simple progression of numbers, which represents this idea. And my first piece, which was written according to these 2 points, the sound pane and the time cage, was Innermost Man. And this was the piece which won Donemus Prize. And more or less 10 years I was composing with these number progressions. So most of my pieces from 2002 to 2012 are based on the same model, rhythmic model, which I spread not only, which I project not only on the rhythmic level, but also on the macro rhythmic level. So the forms are also made of this communicative vessel system.
And you called it an objective music.
Yeah, exactly.
Why?
Exactly. So it was important for me to formulate what I'm doing. When we formulate, when we fix it in letters, in texts, we objectivate the matter which we deal with. And so I decided to describe my relations with music, with time in music, with sound in music. And when I formulated it in quite simple sentences, it's not a big article, I noticed that I'm looking for objectivity, let's say, not for my subjective structures which I create, which I imagine with my fantasy, and I create myself. But I'm rather looking for existing structures outside of myself or inside of myself, but existing already. So it's not creating, it's finding. Finding objects. So objective, it's not about objectivity, I would say, it's about objects. Because anyway it's very subjective, of course. So this guided me to this term, objective music. And it was also very important to formulate, because when I formulated it, in some years, this was the point of resisting for me, because in 2010, 2011, I felt that this idea of being in cage starts to be a problem for me again, and that I created a kind of tradition, let's say, for myself. Of course, I don't speak about global things, and that probably it's time to leave it. The tradition was complete.
And at that moment, I think we can listen the excerpt from the Innermost Man. about the resistance you mentioned. At about that time, you co-organized with other Russian composers a group Structural Resistance. So whose idea it was? And
it was collective idea. It was me and Boris Filanovsky. He was always very active in St. Petersburg in organizing events and organizing concert events and conceptual events, lectures, etc. And me, from my side, I was also trying to be active in organizing things. Because, and we can speak about later probably, because for me composing music is something very local. Music is not an object which is separated from the other world, from our inner reality and inner structure. So composing in general, it's not only composing music, it's composing life also, it's composing situations around. And this was from very beginning quite important for me, so that's why I organized the magazine Tribune for Contemporary Music, and I worked a lot in connection with Moscow Contemporary Music Ensemble, proposing some projects, proposing some concert ideas. And when we met, me and Boris, in St. Petersburg, we realized that we need to do something. It was very complex time for contemporary music, so we decided to create a kind of something which will stress the society, the musical society. And we, together with our friends, by that time it was Anton Safronov, Sergei Nevsky, Valery Voronov. We decided to organize this group, which is, by the way, Structural Resistance. The abbreviation is StRes. And we formulated a manifest. Manifest was a kind of stressful also for other composers, and that was the idea, because we started it with the quite radical sentence, we are contemporary music. The idea was not to say that we are contemporary music. The idea was to make other composers to say, why you? Probably it's me. No, that's me, contemporary music.
So to provoke.
It's provocation, and it worked this very way, because the same time, like several months later, several other groups appeared, like Sound Plasticity, yes, in Moscow Conservatoire. OK, a group of girls in Moscow Conservatoire. Yes, the Most, the group of traditional orientated composers, and so it was.
And Molot.
And Molot was a bit later, but it was a kind of probably a consequence of this grouping. And this grouping, what it did, it made us more visible for the society. We attracted an interest of newspapers, of journalists, and what is very important, of artists from other fields of art, like visual artists, painters, and the people from theater. And these fields, not musical fields, but these other cultural fields, they had and they still have more or less financial support for big projects, for festivals. And they started to involve composers into the activities of their societies. And starting from 2008, more or less, I believe that with the help of this, our first kick, the kick of StRes, composers started to be really visible, and they started to interact with other kind of kinds of arts. So I feel that both the group and the magazine were two very important kicks, I call it kick, for the situation in Russia. And the next kick was Academy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's important that it was not in the age of internet, so the
beginning
of the internet.
Yes,
so
social.
I remember I lived in Perm and I read this magazine, and it gave really a lot since I couldn't find anything in the internet. Mm-hmm. But I never thought that Gaudamus has some impact on that. But
yes,
actually,
Gaudamus,
it supported Russian music at that point.
Exactly, Gaudamus financed the.
Maybe they don't know it.
They don't know. They didn't know. But it was my private initiative.
Yeah, but you talked about the academy, so it was a next step in organizing something.
Exactly, the next step.
Academy of for young composers in Tchaikovsky city.
Yes, which we started to prepare in 2009, and the first editions was 2011. So the idea was that I will never teach there, and the idea was that we invite only foreign composers. Mm-hmm. So to bring Europe, to bring the world inside Russia. To Tchaikovsky, in the middle of Russia. And actually it was like this till the last edition. It was the first time when I decided to teach also. But I can tell you it's because I started to teach myself in different academies in some European countries, in Spain, in Israel, in Austria, in France, etc., etc. And I realized that first of all I have need of teaching, and no, it's not the first of all, it's the second. The first is that students, they were happy with my lessons. They really wanted to continue. They really asked where they can meet me again to have consultations or master classes. And so it came from outside.
Speaking about Russian situation, did you have any proposals from Russian conservatories to teach there? Or at least discussions?
There was a small discussion in Perm when they started, when they launched the composers department in the Institute of Culture. But I don't know if it works now or what happened there. This I don't know. But no, in Moscow Conservatoire I'm a rare guest. And I have not, I can say it openly, I'm not welcomed composer in Moscow Conservatoire. I'm afraid still. Why? I don't know. Probably you know it better because you are inside. I'm outside and I see no official interest. And even when I'm more and more teaching worldwide, no proposals from the conservator, but from the, let's say, official part of conservator, because the students, I can say that in 2011, 12, 13, most of the students of Moscow Conservatoire who are interested in, let's say, in problematic view on music, in not in traditional way of composing and thinking music. Most of them asked me for consultations, and I can say that the generation of late 80s and beginning of 90s, I mean who was born these years, most of them I had a kind of influence on them. And but not from the conservator as a structure.
When I was preparing to the interview, there is a funny thing when you Google your name exactly in Google and write Dmitry Kourliandski composer. You can see then your face photo, and under the photo it's written Dmitry Kourliandski, film score composer.
Okay.
And
I didn't Google my name.
You should check. And I found that in one of the interviews to Ekaterina Biryukova in Open Space, .ru, you told, I will cite it in Russian, «Сам я несколько раз работал в кино и в театре, не без интереса, но не скажу, что доволен результатом». So it was 2011. 11. So it's about both cinema and theater, and you were not so happy.
Yeah.
So a lot of things changed now?
2011. It means that by that time I had one work in the theater. It was Moscow Theater, etc., where I made my first production with the young stage director. It was how to translate it? Drums in the Night, Brecht. And by that time I had already 2 or 3 movies.
Yeah, Doomed to War is this the one? Yeah,
Doomed to War, yes, I don't know the translations. And 2 more films.
Yeah, I checked. It's quite a good actors actually. So
yes. The thing is, by that time, yes, 11 is the beginning of my close collaboration. Our first project was 2012, I think, with Yukhananov, and it's very much different because when I work with Yukhananov, we are both the authors, the creators of what we are doing. It's permanent exchange of ideas, permanent, it's absolute respect to each other. So usually the situation is quite different. The stage director, the movie director has exact idea, exact hearing of what is needed there. And the composer has to be kind of avatar of the director to be able to project his idea into sound space. And for me, as a composer, academic composer, serious, let's say, I'm less and less serious, but you understand what I mean. It was really not the right point of work.
So you can consider it as a negative experience.
It is negative experience.
This kind of romantic music.
Yes, it's negative experience, but it's very at the same time it's very important experience for me to try a different skin, to try a different position of view on myself. How can I deal with this another situation? I can't say that I'm interested now to repeat such kind of experiences. No, now if I deal with the stage directors or with movie directors, first of all they must be interested in my very music, and so the best is if they just use my music, like it happened in fantastic, absolutely genius film by Rustam Hamdamov, Мешок без дна. By chance, just he found my music somewhere, a CD of mine. It was Maps of Non-Existent Cities, St. Petersburg, and he felt that this is the music for his movie. And in my opinion, this is my best movie experience. My music is almost all the time present, and.
But you actually didn't take part, so you just composed the piece before?
Yeah, exactly. But the movie was also already done, so we just met and we felt the connection. Hopefully we will continue this collaboration. But anyway, this absolute need of respect, and in this respect there is always a risk. So I respect the composer's way, how he sees, how he hears the movie. It's probably different from what I hear, but I respect him and I take this risk to give him this role of author of the soundtrack, of the sound space of movie.
In your interview to Dissonance magazine, to Monica Pasechnik, you told, in our country, in our city, doing art in the most abstract sense of the word is probably a sort of radical political gesture. So, did you consider your opera to be a radical political gesture, or maybe other operas?
Yeah, always.
Yes, does it
my answer is always.
Always?
Always, yes. The thing is, again, music is not something which is separate from the life. Music is about social relations. Music is about political systems, etc. It's model of social relations, model of political systems. And the way the sounds, let's say the most simple, let's take the most simple object, yes, of music. The sounds relate to each other, how they interact, how they, which system they follow. This is our political statement. And I usually speak that, for example, the tonal system is the system where the presence of center, the main tonality, the center is absolute. So it's about absolute monarchy. And the periphery attracts to the center. And this is the absolute monarchy scheme. I believe that abstract art, the art which manifests the liberation from the model thinking, from the centralized ideas. One can call it anarchy, one can call it, I don't know, libertarian or whatever. It has this political aspect.
But do you want the listeners to perceive it as a political aspect?
I even don't feel myself as a listener. I don't have this position of listener. Because listening, what we can listen to a result. Yes, so we have an object, we have something on table, and we start to relay with it, we start to deal with it. So for many years already, I don't think in this objective sense. I think in the processual dimension, and I'm interested in the processes which interest me, which are born inside me. Of course, they are provoked from some impulses from outside or from inside, from my biographical experiences, etc. But the listener comes after. As we already started to speak about politics, I can quote Marx, Karl Marx. He said once that a piece of art forms the audience which is able to perceive it.
At about the time when you composed the Drill Islands, your creation gradually changed went to some other direction. So we can already talk about 2 periods of your creation. And why did it happen?
Well, as I said before, this, let's say, objective period, for me it was going deeper and deeper into these structures, into these cages which I find which I find in nature or in myself. And when you go deeper and deeper, your optics become more and more sharp, yes, more and more detailed. And in a certain point, if we take a microscope, in a certain point on the level of molecules or nano level, there are no cages anymore. So there is no. It's a kind of ever existing, everywhere existing matter, which without borders, without borders of where the object starts and where the object ends. And so it was a gradual but natural process. So it was not rejecting the cage, actually. It was a point where the cage just disappeared.
But
because on this level, there is no cage.
But there was no turning point.
No.
Turning point.
Turning point. I don't call it turning point.
So it was gradual.
Yes, for me it was gradual, and the thing is coming back to this system thinking, this concrete thinking, objective thinking, becomes harder and harder for me. It is still possible because it's a very stable system. I can just, in 2013 I think I decided to try to compose again a piece in the, let's say, style which I worked in for 10 years, and it worked very well. It was very easy for me to come back. Now it's not about easy or not easy, it's about the motivation. I see no reason to come back. We have not so much time, and so I feel that I have a need of going deeper and deeper. And yes, in this way of rejecting, in a certain point I came to the text scores, the concept scores, yes, which don't deal with sounds or even with musical situation at all. It's just a small private gestures of whoever.
But did the process of composing changed completely, or the kind of approach you had before? Can you compare it somehow?
In a way it changed completely, but if you look at it deeper, it's absolutely the same. It's about rejecting the models.
So we start with that.
Yes, exactly. I said in the very beginning, I think, that I wanted to reject the models which I felt like in supermarket, that I can do this, whatever. And everything which I look at is a complete tradition. I know how I can study how to do it. I can reproduce it. But as I said, I turned into myself and I started to find my personal structures. And the same is here. So it's the same, the process is the same, but the result seems to be completely different.
I have an interesting quote here. Well, 10 years ago, when I was a student, I sent you a couple of scores of mine, and just recently I found this email from you when you wrote some advice for me. So I can cite it.
10 years ago?
Huh?
10 years ago.
It was 2008.
Very interesting.
So I want to cite it in Russian now. Свободная нотация очень ограничивает материал, вводит на банальные ритмические обороты. Когда вы предоставляете музыканту свободу, вы ему не развязываете руки, а наоборот отдаетесь на произвол его слухового исполнительского опыта. Очень советую записать пьесу в четком ритме. Вы обратите внимание на нюансы и тонкости материала, которые могли пропустить в свободном варианте записи. So, Dmitry Kourliandski in version of 2018 is completely disagree with Dmitry Kourliandski of version 2008. And
no, I can understand him.
yes.
I absolutely understand him. Of course, it always depends on the concrete situation. If we speak about, I don't remember what was the piece, it's always the question of context. If the piece asks for this detailed information, yes, or let's say, I'm afraid that there was a part, there was a part work, partly free, partly
Something like that.
strictly notated. And this was always for me a problem. For example, aleatorics, for me always was a bit problematic because when it is absolute aleatory, yes, when there is no frames, where you musician really free to create the space, to create the form. This is one situation. Another situation, when you put musician and in a traditional score, and you just give him choice how to deal with just few. Okay, you are free to choose the order of notes, but you are not free to decide the time, to decide the dramaturgy, etc., etc. So you give only one of the points. I think it's problem. I think it's because it's a kind of I have a body, yes, quite formed, let's say. I see the shapes, I see the borders, etc. But one arm is formless, and it transforms all the time. It's probably interesting. Probably it's, well, actually, I'm trying to find the connection between what I said before and what I'm saying now. I see the connection, but of course of course we change a lot. For example, in the text scores which I'm doing now, not only, yes, I'm doing different stuff, but in the text scores it's it's absolutely open situation. Even with this remark, when I just give the whole responsibility to listener, and this is a kind of radically open situation.
Yeah, but sometimes you give like this groups of notes or of types of playing, and the performer can choose. So this is actually partly notated.
Yes,
music.
this is already, yes. It's a kind of, yeah. I'm agree. It's a well. It is a dialectics, let's say. But for me, it's very important because 10 years ago, of course, it was my objective time, and it was very much important for me, this strict notation, strict positioning.
Strict rhythmics.
Yes, strict positioning of events, and it was very important. But at the same time, I remember that I already had, for example, in 2005, I composed the Broken Memory piece, which is an open notation. And then in 2007, I think, or 6, I composed the Dissecta, which is an open notation again. So I already started this. I think the problem was the aleatorics. We have to see the context.
We can say that in 10 years, you started to trust the performer much more, and why it didn't happen, and maybe when?
Yeah, that's true, actually. Yes, the level of the respect, which I was speaking about, the theater music, etc., increased a lot since that time.
But why?
Because also about objective music, which I didn't say. I didn't say about the kinetic sculpture, which I was always very much interested. And if one asks me what are my main influences in music, I would name some sculptors, some artists who makes the kinetic sculpture, starting from Tengli and coming to coming to contemporary artists, which
Benedict Mason.
Okay. No. I speak about visual artists.
Visual artists.
Yes. I speak about the people who does these kinetic sculptures. No, so the influences come from the visual, from this kinetic art. And for me, music was, again, this is the idea of cage, yes, idea of the communicative vessels, yes, which I mentioned in the beginning. It is a kinetic sculpture, and you press the button and it starts to function, and the functions are, it's a fatal machine actually. There is a kind of fatality in it. You can stop it only when the motor is over, or you can break it, yes. And
but is it somehow connected with performers?
For sure, of course, this fatality, also a kind of the fatality of form, of the piece as a mechanism, yes. It's the third point of my the interest of that time, yes. So the musicians become the parts of a mechanism. What was also important at that time, and it is about objectiveness, is that in this situation of mechanic-like pieces, yes, with this situation of extended techniques, with this situation of totally structured time, there is no door, no window for musician for a subjective interpretation, for you understand what I mean? There is just no possibility to interpret in a personal way, and the only interpretation, the difference of interpretation in this situation becomes the physical difference of musician himself, herself, his physical abilities, yes. And from one side, from the other side, the physical abilities and specifics of the instrument itself. And that's all. The difference becomes the physical, the objective difference. So it's objective interpretation. And I'm more and more interested to find the musician, the person, not obligatory musician. That's why these text scores are for everybody. To find this person as a machine, anyway, as a machine. Machine of models, machine of rememberings, machine of expectations, machine of etc., etc., etc. We are all these kind of machines. And so but they become a found object. If before it was a created object, even if I created within a found material, yes, found structures, found given biographical motivations, etc., etc., but I created, yes. And now I'm more and more interested in the human being as a machine itself, producing these models, projecting these models outside. So it's the same, and at the same time it's completely different. I'm interested not only in being author myself, but I'm very much interested to give possibility to create a situation for everybody, for musician, for listener, for pedestrian, for passenger, whoever, to become an author, but not an avatar. And this is very important. When I hear two similar pieces, for example, when I hear a piece which reproduces some ancient or more or less recent model, even in this situation, I'm listening to it to find the difference. And this small, it can be one note, it can be one pause, it can be one strange, probably mistake, I don't know, whatever. But this very mistake, the rest becomes a silence, cage silence, yes? The rest, and this is the piece. So everybody, even the pieces which we see, and it's just the real model thinking, traditional, conservative, inertial, even there, my labor as a listener, my goal as a listener is to find this small difference, this small individuality there. And probably if it is a situation of a master class or whatever, probably to point it and to see what will happen if we, for example, remove the rest. Can it be probably here you are, probably in this very small point is the essence of your author presence, of your individual presence. Can it be then kind of stretched into a big form or into the whole artistic life? I don't know. Or probably it will rest this small point. Do we need this time to wait until this point appear, or it's the beginning and the ending at the same time? Or probably we need this model, this traditional conservative silence. We need it for this difference to appear. Then when I come back, when I observe the piece from this high point of individual, I don't know, mistake or whatever, yes, this individual point, it becomes a kind of confirmation of this model-like thinking. It can happen, and I believe when we look at two similar things, it's very important to see the difference. Otherwise, it becomes a kind of racism. Yes, I don't know if it's, but old-fashioned racism. Yes, all, I don't know, Eastern people are similar, all black people are similar, all white people are similar. It's the same. There is this danger of uniform thinking. And for me, what I'm thinking about now, what I'm doing now, I'm doing different things, of course, but this is one of the important directions which I'm following now. This is very important.
So I think that the fact that you started to perform improvisations yourself
right.
also can influence your music and your interaction with performers. So how it influences your work?
Again, it's not, probably it somehow influences my work, probably, but for me it's a private experience. For 2 years only I started to play electronics. It's improvised electronic experimental music in the direction of, I can, one example, Autekr, for example, it's one of the, but it's, I hope that it is different. Together with my good friend, sound artist Andrei Guryanov, we created a duo called KGXXX, and for 2 years we play, not very often, but 5-6 times a year. We are both interested in big time, so we did 2 marathons. One was 12 hours, the other was 9 hours, and mostly we play 1 hour plus something. For me, it's I'm not professional in electronics. I cannot program or I cannot create my own instruments. So I don't want to imitate the skillness in this field. So I play with my iPad, with the applications which I can find in the App Store. But of course, I create my own combinations of these instruments, and they give more or less individual sound result. And Andrei, he's the skilled man, so he puts it into the self-elaborated situation. For me, it's extremely important experience. I was so I'm back instrumentalist. I'm playing again. 23 years ago I stopped playing, and then I started again. And for me, it is the personal trace into unknown situation. We never decide before what we are going to do. We never decide before. We always start to create from scratch. And of course, we are from the very beginning more or less blocked into the possibilities of the instruments which we choose. So it's the same as the piece which we will show at the end of the program.
So it has impact in this way.
Yeah,
on
probably
on your
yes,
composed music.
Probably yes. I would say that my this electronic field, which I started 2 years ago, is the result of the open pieces which I started to compose in 2014 or yes, the other way. But it becomes more and more important for me, even for my inner feeling.
What is music for you?
Oh shit. Yes, it's very easy. Music is everything. Music is the air, music is the ground, music is the body, music is blood, music is cars.
Okay. What is the place of contemporary classical music in the musical world for you, in your opinion?
I don't care. I don't care. It's very music is life, as I said, and it is private life. And how it fits the
pop music, rock music,
yes,
jazz, you don't care.
Yes, I can quote again Marx. If it happens that your private life fits contemporary music scene, probably you are lucky, probably not, probably you will be swallowed by this scene, but I don't care.
Next question. I understand that contemporary music scene is quite diverse, but still, what do you consider to be maybe the most important trends appearing now for the nearest future?
What will be the most important trends?
Trends, yeah. Maybe what's appearing now you think has the best perspective in contemporary classical music? What do you feel?
Yes, well, as soon as I'm interested in the individuality, in this very small difference, in this point of mistake or whatever. And I believe that this has future.
So anti-trendy things, kind of.
I don't know what is trendy things, and
like mainstream, something which becomes mainstream.
To be honest, I don't feel it. It's not, again, because I managed to turn my perception of the world, of the musical world also, into this difference perspective. I'm looking for differences, and I see them.
In 2011, there was an article in, on website openspace.ru under the title "Why I Don't Leave Russia." And you told that you want to stay here because you want to try to build something, but you also was upset because of lack of like global state institutions supporting culture. And you told that you see it as the most important and the only way to build the future. So 7 years after, how can you answer this question about living in Russia? And do you have different reasons not to leave it or leave it?
No, it's the same, absolutely. So from one side, and you see it, I'm trying again to give platform for young composers, for musicians, for example, in this theater, in the projects which I launch, yes, like the Open Space Academy, like the Tchaikovsky Academy, and my theater also, yes, where I work. We provide space for new music. It's one of the main interests of the theater, and I feel I cannot leave it. I feel that if I will leave it, then it will disappear. And I feel, probably I'm mistaken, but I feel responsibility. I remember many years ago, I was in conservatoire. I heard about such strange composer Vadim Karasikov, Russian composer living in Yekaterinburg, and he's composing very silent music again, but it's absolute different silence. It's romantic silence, full of inaudible events. It's inaudible new complexity. And his music, I saw and heard his pieces several times in concerts, and I was struck with this kind of thinking music. And at that time he was living in Berlin or somewhere, and he was like an alien. So it was very distant. It was something which is not happening with me. And suddenly I met him in conservatoire in a corridor. And I asked him, "Are you Vadim Karasikov?" And he said, "Yes." What was important for me that, no, he's here. He's here, and I can speak to him. I can ask him something. This presence is very important, and probably it's it sounds a bit strange, but I feel that my presence, at least I try to make my presence important. I try to help young composers and musicians to realize themselves. But the absence of institutions, the absence of possibility to apply for a grant, for a stipendium, to the absence of a place where musicians and composers can be connected. It's a huge lack for the country, and that's why many of young composers continue to leave the country and continue to immigrate, because we all live. The most of the commissions come from Europe, and probably it's easier to live in Europe, yes, and to be there. But for me, it's okay. I survive, and I have a luck situation that I'm both present there and here and everywhere, more or less. But I understand not for everybody it can be like this.
Now it's time to show a full piece of you, and the piece which you consider to be your best at the moment. Which piece it would be?
Let's take Maps of Non-Existent Cities, Bludenz. For example, it's second string quartet. I will never say it's my best piece. I will never say about any of my pieces it's my best piece. Again, because I'm not grading things. Yes, it lives people perform it, and it means that it interacts with the outer world somehow. What's important, probably the last thing which I say, composers, and not only composers, artists in general, and everybody, when the piece is complete, I feel myself dead for this piece. It lives its own life, and I'm not anymore there. And we have possibility to die as many times as many pieces we have. And I cannot say that I prefer these. Probably I just cannot say it. It's an important piece for me.
Okay, so, and maybe if you want to say some words about the piece before listening it.
It's one of the pieces of this big cycle, which is probably complete. Now I have about 10 cities. Probably I will continue, I don't know. Commissioned by the festival in Bludenz. First performed, and in the recording it is also by Dmitri Quartet. And it's in scheme notation, which you will see. And it is about it's psychogeographic piece. It's about personal traces, personal choices, here and now, where to go, how long to stay here, to listen to the others, wait there and to join them, or to stay separate, etc., etc. It's a piece about private decisions. And at the same time, the sound material is again very much reduced. It's reduced to 2 or 3 gestures. So it's a kind of, again, this freedom, but inside in a very reduced sound space.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, and good luck with the project.
Thanks.